Over a campfire. Chapter 8. The Goodnight Echoes. The hallway lights flickered faintly as tired feet dragged toward cabin doors. It was just past 10. Tomorrow, they'd leave this place behind. The teachers had also finished cleaning up, feeling quite relaxed and ready to go to sleep. They're not going to bed yet, Miss Blakely said crisply, standing. But they've earned some comfort tonight. Controlled comfort. Mr. Hahn adjusted his glasses, his eyes soft with understanding. A little music, some snacks. It helps quiet their minds after so much excitement. Even I'm still humming from today's rhythm. Miss Jordan, the youngest among them, was already halfway to the hallway with her arms full of brown paper bags, each one labeled with room numbers in bright marker. Already ahead of you. I packed these before lunch, trail mix, cookie packs, some chocolate, and juice boxes. No caffeine, I promise. Smart girl, Miss Collins said warmly, standing to help distribute the load. If we give them something now, they won't be tiptoeing to raid their backpacks at midnight. Ms. Rayner, arms folded and expression unreadable, simply nodded. We'll go room by room. No more than 5 minutes per visit. Then lights out by 11. And so began the quiet march. At room 2B, Ms. Jordan knocked gently, her ponytail swaying as she beamed. Special delivery, she said as Mia and Lena opened the door, wide-eyed and delighted. Mr. Hahn handed them the bag with a gentle nod. You've all done wonderfully today. Just don't let cookies keep you up past the owls. Room 4B was louder. Mike and Rory were play sparring with rolled socks when Ms. Rayner's commanding knock froze them mid-duel. Snack bag, she said curtly. Enjoy, but if I hear wrestling past 11, we'll be revisiting the camp schedule earlier. The boys nodded like soldiers saluting a general. Room 6B opened to find Ms. Collins and Ms. Blakely standing together, the latter eyeing Caleb and Darnell like she was still mentally refereeing their earlier seating dispute. No debates tonight, Ms. Blakely said, handing them their bag. Just rest. You'll need it tomorrow. And hydrate, Ms. Collins added. Juice is in the bag. Don't just eat cookies. Room after room, the ritual repeated. The teachers knocked, shared quiet words, and handed over modest gifts of care. It was a routine born not of policy, but of instinct, the understanding that comfort and kindness could do what rules sometimes could not. By the time they reached room 3B, Hannah and Gina's room, Ms. Jordan knocked softly, her arms now empty, but her smile just as bright. Snack time, she said as Gina opened the door. Miss Collins offered the bag with a kind smile. A little something sweet to end your first night at camp. And remember, Mr. Hahn added, his voice like a lullaby drifting through the doorway. You can dream better on a full heart and a quiet mind. The teachers moved on, their footsteps fading down the corridor. Inside each cabin, voices softened, wrappers crinkled, and friendships deepened over shared snacks and sleepy smiles. Jason, perched at the edge of his bunk, chewed slowly on a piece of granola and squinted toward the paper bag. Something was off. Hey, he said, nudging Dan with his socked foot. Wasn't there supposed to be juice in these? Dan frowned and checked again. Yeah, Miss Collins said there'd be juice. Jason stood up, brushing crumbs from his shorts. Well, there isn't. Maybe they ran out or forgot. I'm heading out to grab some before the shop closes. You want one? Dan blinked. You're serious? Jason nodded, already reaching for his hoodie. It's just past the dining hall. They said it stays open until midnight, right? I'll be back in 10. All right, get me the apple one if they have it. Dan called as Jason was halfway to the door. Jason gave a lazy salute and slipped out, the door clicking shut behind him. The evening air was cool against his cheeks, the breeze scented with pine and wood smoke. Path lights flickered gently along the stone walkway, casting golden circles on the ground. He walked quickly, his feet crunching over gravel, determined and a little smug. He knew the teachers had meant well, but no juice? That was an oversight he couldn't let slide. At the small camp shop, a cabin-turned-kiosk lit warmly from within, a friendly counselor was stacking items behind the counter. You're just in time, she said as he walked in, breath slightly puffed. 4 juice boxes, please. Apple if you've got it. She handed over the small cartons, and Jason passed her the crumpled bills from his hoodie pocket. Hannah flopped onto her bed with a soft whump, tossing her folded hoodie aside. That was the last of it, she said, clicking her duffel bag shut. Gina, balancing her toothbrush between her lips, gave a muffled reply. Image him. I don't want to go back yet. From the room next door, laughter erupted. Zoe's unmistakable voice rang out. Reverse, skip. Reverse again. You can't play. House rule. Mia groaned. Zoe, you just made that up. It's called creative strategy, he countered proudly. Hannah giggled, stretching her legs toward the window and peeking out through the slightly fogged glass. Down in the common lounge, just barely visible under the dull yellow glow of the hanging bulbs, a group of students were still wide awake and huddled on the floor. An explosion of Uno cards lay sprawled across a thin mat, like the aftermath of a colorful storm. Candy wrappers littered the floor, Skittles, Choco Pie, sour gummies. All opened, half-eaten, and long abandoned. From the chaos, Zoe's triumphant voice rose above the others. Reverse. Skip. Reverse again. You can't play? That's 4 turns in a row. Read the room. Lena threw a card at him. You made that up. That's not a real rule. It is, Zoe grinned. In the Zoe edition. Page 1. Zoe always wins. No one asked for your rulebook, Mia huffed, stuffing a handful of gummy worms into her mouth. This is why nobody trusts you during group work. Jealousy, Zoe said, fanning himself dramatically with a wild card. It's a disease. Back in the room, Gina laughed from her bed, hugging her pillow. They're going to fight before someone wins. I'd bet 10 baht Mia flips the whole deck in 5 minutes, Hannah said, still watching through the glass. I'd bet 20 she already did, Gina snorted. Mia hates losing. Outside, Darnell dramatically flopped onto his back. Someone deal me back in. I just went to pee, not to be erased from existence. You were gone for 6 rounds. Zoe called. We had to move on. Lena waved a card in the air. Fine, but he's getting 20 cards to start with. That's not how this works. Darnell protested. It is now, Mia said, holding the draw pile like a weapon. Take your punishment. Back in their room, Gina rolled onto her stomach and looked at Hannah. Do you want to go join them? Hannah hesitated. Nah, I kinda like just watching them. They look like a sitcom down there, Gina chuckled. All they need is a laugh track. They heard more shouting. Uno, Zoe screamed. No, you forgot to say it before placing the card. Lena objected. Proof, or it didn't happen, Zoe said smugly. Mia narrowed her eyes. We all heard it. 2 seconds late. Draw 4, sucker. Zoe groaned dramatically. I am surrounded by wolves. Betrayed at my peak. Gina sighed fondly. I'm gonna miss this. Me too, Hannah said softly, still watching. They didn't say anything for a moment. The chaos outside carried on, but a quiet peace settled between them inside the room. Jean. Yeah. You ever think, we'll remember this exact night? Gina rolled onto her back and stared at the ceiling. I hope so. In cabin 3B, Rory slumped onto his bed, his duffel bag half-zipped. He gave it one lazy pat, satisfied. I'm done, he muttered, voice slurred with fatigue. Everything's in, I think. Mike, sitting cross-legged at the small writing desk in the corner, barely glanced up. His eyes were locked on the paper in front of him. Pen scratching softly, he scribbled line after line with unwavering focus. Rory pulled the blanket over himself, groaning. I don't know how you're still awake. My brain's fried from that hike. Mike responded with a faint nod, but didn't speak. The scratching of the pen continued, slow and deliberate. Rory yawned and turned toward the wall. Anyway, good night, man. Night, Mike said absently, his voice low. Within minutes, Rory's soft snores filled the room, steady and rhythmic. Mike didn't notice. He sat hunched, elbow planted on the desk, one hand supporting his forehead as the other moved in swift strokes. The letter had grown to several paragraphs now, the ink a little darker where he had pressed harder. Every now and then, he paused, eyes scanning what he had written, lips moving silently. Was it a letter to someone back home? A confession? A memory? Whatever it was, there was something weighty in the way he wrote, something he wasn't ready to say aloud. A quiet wind whistled outside. Mike blinked slowly, his hand finally pausing above the page. He exhaled, long and quiet, and set the pen down gently beside the paper. He stared at the letter for a few seconds more. Then, without folding it, he slid it under his pillow, turned off the lamp, and climbed into bed. Darkness fell over the room, save for a faint sliver of moonlight peeking through the curtains. Rory stirred once, but didn't wake. And Mike? He lay still, eyes open, staring at the wooden ceiling as if listening to the night whisper secrets only he could hear. In the other room, Dan and Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes glued to Maya as she spun her ghost story. The dim glow of a single flashlight cast flickering shadows on their faces, making the atmosphere thick with suspense. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper, sending a cold shiver through the room. Eliza wasn't just any woman. She was said to carry a curse. On a stormy night much like tonight, she heard footsteps outside her cabin. Slow, deliberate, crunching on the dead leaves. She looked out the window, nothing but darkness. But the footsteps didn't stop. They moved all around her cabin, making a perfect circle. No start, no end. She paused, letting the silence stretch. The next morning, Eliza found muddy footprints circling the cabin. No footprints leading away. No footprints coming in. Just one endless, terrifying ring. Like something was trapped, or worse, something had been waiting. Dan shivered, gripping his knees tighter. Maya leaned closer, eyes gleaming in the dim light. That night, the whispers began. Faint at first, her name, over and over. Then shadows flickered just beyond the firelight. One night, Eliza woke and saw a figure at the foot of her bed. No face, just blackness. The figure didn't move or blink, it just waited. She swallowed hard. The next day, Eliza was gone. The cabin was empty, doors wide open, footprints still circling, but no Eliza. Everyone was quiet, holding their breath. Maya's voice dropped to a terrifying final note. But here's the twist. The footprints, they weren't Eliza's. They belonged to something else. And every time someone disappears, those footprints show up again, circling, waiting for the next person trapped inside that endless ring. Some say, the footsteps are still out there tonight. And if you listen closely, you might hear them, walking just outside. Before Maya could finish, a sudden, sharp knock echoed from the door, startling everyone. The room fell completely silent. Dan's eyes went wide. What? Who was that? Caleb jumped up, glancing toward the door. No way, man. This isn't funny. Maya's flashlight flickered in her trembling hand. It wasn't me. The door creaked open slowly, and there stood Jason, grinning mischievously. Thought I'd join the fun, he said, stepping inside. Everyone let out a breath they didn't realize they'd been holding. You nearly gave Dan a heart attack, Caleb muttered, exhaling sharply. Relax, it's just me, Jason said, stepping inside. He plopped down beside them, his eyes gleaming. All right, Maya, continue. I'm ready for the chills. Maya's grin returned, a little braver now. Okay, but no more knocking, all right. Jason raised his hands in mock surrender as the story resumed, and the room filled once again with whispered suspense. Maya continued. They say the cabin where Eliza vanished was boarded up. But years later, a group of hikers, 5 teenagers, actually, decided to spend a night there. They thought it would be fun. They joked, played music, even lit a fire inside. Around midnight, one of them, Liam, heard scratching sounds on the wall. Just faint, like fingernails dragging slowly across old wood. Dan swallowed, hugging the pillow on his lap. Liam looked outside. Nothing. But the firelight flickered. And when he turned back to his friends, one of them, Alyssa, was missing. Gone. No scream, no struggle. Just gone. Jason tilted his head. Creepy but classic. Maya smiled coldly. Here's where it gets strange. The rest of the group started searching, calling her name. Then they noticed something chilling, footprints. That same circling pattern Eliza saw. But this time, they weren't outside the cabin. They were inside, circling the group as they stood frozen. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. You're messing with us. I wish I were, Maya said, her tone icy. One by one, they disappeared. Every few minutes, another friend gone. But the weirdest part? The remaining boy, Jordan, managed to run. He escaped the cabin. They found him weeks later, lost in the woods, babbling nonsense. His journal had one final entry. She reached into her bag for effect, pulling out a blank notebook and flipping to an empty page. It said, the circle followed us. It doesn't need a cabin anymore. It's inside us now. The room fell silent. Then a slow creak came from the hallway outside their room. Everyone froze. Jason turned toward the door, his grin fading. That wasn't me. Maya quickly said, her voice lower now, almost hurried. Guys, it's getting late. We should all go to sleep. Keep this for another day. There was a beat of silence. Caleb glanced at the hallway, his face pale. Dan nodded a little too quickly, rubbing his arms like the room had suddenly gone cold. Jason tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. Yeah, cool story, Maya. Totally made up, right? Maya didn't answer immediately. Her eyes held Jason's for a moment longer than necessary. Then she smiled, just a little. Totally. Jason shifted uncomfortably. All right. Maya stood and brushed imaginary dust off her pajama pants. Lights out. No more creepy stuff. Dan got up and stretched. Good idea. I want to sleep tonight without hearing nails on wood. They turned off the small lamp in the corner. The room was suddenly dim, shadows creeping into corners as they quietly said their goodnights. Jason lingered behind just a second longer, his fingers grazing the doorframe. His voice, now quieter, unsure. You were just messing with us, right? Maya looked at him, her smile barely there. Sleep tight, Jason. Then she turned and walked toward her bed, leaving him standing in the darkened doorway. Somewhere down the hall, a faint creak echoed again, soft, slow, like something shifting its weight. Jason blinked and shook his head, muttering, Floorboards. Just floorboards. But he didn't look back. Meanwhile, in cabin 3B, Hannah, Gina whispered, peeking out from under the cover. Are you sure about this? Hannah nodded, already sliding her feet into her sneakers. Her eyes gleamed with a mix of curiosity and something else, an urgency Gina had never seen in her. I saw something by the window earlier, but I didn't get a chance to check it. Gina sighed, but crawled out after her. If we get caught. We won't, Hannah said with a mischievous smile, grabbing her small flashlight. Gina followed suit, and together, they tiptoed across the creaky floorboards, careful not to wake Lena or Mia, both fast asleep. They eased the door open and slipped out into the cool night. Moonlight filtered through the treetops, casting shifting shadows across the path. The air was thick with pine and dew as they crept around the back of their cabin. Hannah's torch flickered over the mossy ground. It was right there, she whispered, pointing to the base of the wall near the window. And there it was. A faint glow pulsed from behind a patch of dried leaves. Hannah dropped to her knees and brushed them aside. Her breath caught. Nestled into the earth was a stone fragment, smooth, dark with veins of iridescent light swirling faintly beneath its surface. It shimmered faintly, as though reacting to her presence. It's part of it, she said, pulling a rounded object from her hoodie pocket. She held up the stone she'd collected during their hike earlier that morning. There'd been something odd about it, how it hummed gently in her hand, like a purring cat. Now, seeing the glowing piece before her, she realized why it had felt incomplete. Gina crouched beside her, wide-eyed. That's the missing piece. Hannah nodded, gently pressing the two fragments together. They didn't click. They didn't fuse. But for a brief second, the glow grew brighter, and the ground beneath them gave a strange, soft vibration, like a heartbeat. Gina gasped and looked around. Hannah, this is not normal. I know, Hannah whispered. Let's go. Now. The two girls crept back around the room, darting across the grass and slipping inside as quietly as they had left. They climbed back into their beds, breathless but silent. Gina pulled the blanket to her chin. That was not normal, she murmured. Hannah tucked the stones under her pillow, her heart racing. No, it wasn't. Around them, their cabin mates slept peacefully. The night deepened, and the stone, hidden in the folds of her pillow, gave one last faint flicker.